India's Power Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia also here in Davos to hard sell India's story. Thank you so much for being with us here on NDTV. You've, of course, been given an uphill task to convince everyone here that the India story is alive and kicking.
Well, I think it very much is. I think it's important to look at things in context. And if you look at the rest of the world, there are very few stories like India even today in terms of GDP growth rate, in terms of consumption power, in terms of market size, in terms of growth, top line and bottom line of companies. And I think we've been through a difficult year, but so has year and a half, and so has the rest of the world. But I think we're sort of coming out of that downturn now. And looking ahead at good prospects. Also, as you know, Shweta, governments moved a number of gears.
Sure.
And we moved very, very fast in terms of reform, in terms of new implementation measures, execution attitude. So I think slowly but surely, I don't want to speak too soon because I think we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel, but I think we still need to keep plugging away to make sure that it happens.
You know, I've been talking to a number of delegates here about the India story, and the one thing that clearly comes out whenever you talk about some of the roadblocks is infrastructure, 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 and power particularly is a big worry. Would you admit that this is today one of the biggest roadblocks in India's growth story?
Well, let me say this, that India's investment cycle is very much predetermined by her power cycle, because close to about 30-40% of capex in the investment cycle in the industrial sector comes clearly from the power sector. There's no doubt about the fact that that has slowed down. There are structural issues that need to be ironed out. Examples of that is the fact that we need to sign FSAs, we need to get...
But that's not happening, despite the Prime Minister's intervention. You've not seen any movement forward on fuel supply agreements.
Well, that's because you haven't called me on your show for a while. We've actually ironed out all the issues that were stopping private and government companies from signing those FSAs with CIL. I had a 3.5-hour meeting with Shri Prakash Jaiswalji. There were a lot of caveats, a lot of clauses, private sector versus public sector, monitoring of quality. We put in place a number of processes, cleared out all the cobwebs, and as of now, out of the 60 gigs that were supposed to be signed according to the Prime Minister's order way before I took over, in the last 2.5 months, we've signed close to about 12 to 14 gigs. And I'm monitoring that personally on a daily basis. And hopefully in the next 2 weeks to 3 weeks, NTPC will be signing all the FSAs with CIL, which will be
That's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 weeks,
yes,
is that what you're saying?
They've just cleared a lot of issues in the board meeting, which was held yesterday. And I think they will sign their FSAs, another 12, 13, 14 gigs, and then you'll see a lot of private producers coming in. There was an issue with regard to CIL asking for long-term PPAs in order to be able to sign that the FSAs. We've obviated that so that now the private producers, private generators, the IPPs can sign those FSAs without having a long-term PPA in place. So all of those issues, structural issues, we've cleared out. And I must through you also thank the coal minister for his cooperation on this issue. But along with that, please also remember that that is only one part of the puzzle, which is generation. There's also transmission and distribution.
And that remains the critical bit, absolutely.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, it's like you're talking about production of a product, but but you need to make sure you're able to sell it to your customer, and at the end of the day, retrieve that value monetarily from your customer. Now, for that, the most important piece of the puzzle is the discoms and the financial health of those discoms. We need to get those discoms back to health.
But that's something that's being talked about for a very long time. How do you ensure that gets done? Because you're talking about the AT&T losses, you're also talking about... So explain to us the strategy you have in place.
So we talked about, prior to starting this interview, some of the things that we're thinking of doing. So we have the FRP, the Financial Restructuring Package, which is close to about 1,90,000 crores, mainly concentrating on 7 to 8 state discoms, which altogether constitute close to about 1 lakh crores out of that 1,90,000 crores, where we're putting in place very strict regulations and expectations so as to reduce those AT&C losses, make those discoms really viable. And from my point of view, as far as government is concerned, I don't have an issue at all with any state government subsidizing a section of consumers, whether it's agriculture or otherwise. My only concern is that the discom should be cash neutral from that exercise. So if you're doing a subsidy exercise, that's fine, but that cash amount must be pumped into those discoms so that those discoms remain cash neutral. Now,
how do we
make sure that this happens? I think there's a little bit of transparency that's also required. So we are right now working on a rating structure for all state discoms, and we are actually putting the pieces of the puzzle in, trying to get information and at least put that online for all consumers, financiers, banking agencies, so that there's a rating structure that happens for state discoms. Along with that, as I said to you, I'm having a state Power Ministers Conference on the 5th of February, where we'll be discussing a wide range of issues. It's a very targeted meeting. It's an 8-hour closed-door meeting, very focused across the whole value chain on generation, transmission, and distribution, where I'm picking up with them 6 or 7 key issues that we need to resolve, ranging from grid issues to distribution issues, to RGY and RAP-DRP, to coal block issues, and we're going to have a very focused interaction. And the one clear message I do want to send is that we in central government are here to assist the states in whatever way we can, but we need to make sure that both of us are working together towards that goal and are not on opposite sides of the spectrum.
Okay, important points you've made there, but let me ask a larger question here. Given the fact that fuel supply linkages continue to remain an issue, we are seeing that the basic raw material is getting more and more expensive. We're talking about perhaps even importing the fuel. Are we now heading towards a time when power tariffs are all set to rise? Do we have to live with that reality now that the days of cheap power are over?
Well, let me say this. You've raised critical issues. The first is with regard to input. If you have no fuel, you have no power.
Right.
And therefore, today what is happening is that if you look at the ACQs, the annual contracted quantities, close to about 85% of those ACQs are being fulfilled, which means that a number of plants are operating at roughly 68%, 70% PLF. That impacts every single power plant in terms of investment, in terms of capacity charge. And therefore, if you're able to raise the level of fuel that comes in there, you also have a handle on tariffs. So what we are thinking of in government, and along with the coal ministry and other ministries, is really looking at probably price pooling and bringing in imported coal, making sure we pool that imported coal.
But that raises the cost, right?
That does raise the cost, but I don't think it's a meaningful amount, so I wouldn't want to discount it, but I don't think it'll be an exorbitant amount. Because if you look at the amount of price pooling that needs to happen into the whole basket, you're talking about 10 to 15%. And therefore, the presumptive cost on that pricing will be a weighted average ratio, which will be probably less than 10 to 15%. That being said, I think you talked about the other important aspect of power tariffs. We do not have any direct control over power tariffs because in a federal structure, it's all something that is decided by the states. What we are saying is that there should be tariff revisions, but the key issue there is really the health of the discoms. It's not really a fundamental issue of tariff. So there are two ways you can actually retrieve the health of discoms. One is to reduce your AT&C losses and your transmission losses. The other is to actually raise tariffs. Now, it's up to the states which lever they really want to use. We are trying to assist in every way possible through Rajiv Gandhi Gramin Udhikaran Yojana, RAP-DRP Yojana, where we have devolved close to about, between the two schemes, 40-50,000 crores to all states across the country, therefore trying to reduce these AT&C losses. A lot of these schemes have actually borne fruit. The national average of AT&C losses, which used to be close to about 38%, has now dropped to about 25%.
And do you see that trend continuing of the AT&C losses?
Yes, it's something I'm monitoring myself. I've built in the last 2 months, along with my team in the Power Ministry, we've actually built a dashboard on 6 or 7 key things that I'm personally monitoring on a daily basis. So that ranges from making sure that the CPSU's generation capacity comes on stream, both hydro and thermal, and I'm personally looking at close to about 8 or 9 gigs of that capacity. Grid disturbances, ensuring that the grid operates. We have the fail-safe agreements in place. On the distribution side, ensuring that states reduce AT&C losses. So the number of parameters that I'm trying to look at along with my team to ensure that we actually have a viable sector going forward.
It's great to see such wonderful work happening, because clearly power remains the critical missing piece of the puzzle in the overall India story. If I were to really talk about the blackout that India really faced, it's now been over 6 months. Can you safely assure us that we will not see a situation like that again?
Well, the key thing is to make sure that we all, and when I say we all, that means all state governments along with the centre actually adhere to certain principles. The reason why that blackout happened, and I want to make that very clear, is because there were a number of states that were overdrawing power.
Right.
The minute you overdraw power, you actually don't listen to signals that are being sent in terms of warnings, in terms of destabilization of the grid network and the transmission line, then you actually lead up to that sort of situation. Now, post that, I think a lot of the states, and I want to commend them for that, have actually come online. We've also
you've seen
reduced
that discipline coming in.
Yes, somewhat. We've also reduced the frequency band in terms of the hertz in terms of which the power is pumped through the system, and therefore there are immediate warning signs when generators need to back down if there's too much power coming into the transmission line, or when discoms need to back down if they're drawing out too much. Now, the key issue here is to evolve a carrot and stick policy. Those states that are actually adhering to those guidelines need to be rewarded. Those states that are not, there needs to be an institutional mechanism in place that actually corrects that. If you look at the Electricity Act of 2003, many of the clauses need amendment, and many of those things need to be corrected so as to ensure that things like this don't happen. As we speak, I'm working on those amendments.
Okay.
CA and I have been working together. We've passed the amendments as far as we're concerned. We're now pushing it through the system. My target is to try and get it into Parliament in this Parliament session, the second part of the budget session that's going to come up. I would very much implore the process that we need to go ahead and pass this, but let's see what turn that takes.
India's #1 news app just got even better. Download NDTV's new app. Fully optimized for Retina display. Full screen view. Faster response time. And Sudoku. NDTV's new iPad app. Download now.